Hello everybody, I am your host, Drake. Welcome to the first episode of this new series for the Potomac View. The Potomac View aims to explore the hottest issues at the intersection between the United States and China. Our goal is to shed some unique light on the truth behind everything we hear from the mainstream media and help you, the audience, to form your own opinions. Today's episode will focus on freedom of speech. In the United States, the right to free speech and expression is often taken for granted. It seems like an afterthought for many, the days of being persecuted or outcasted for expressing one's opinion long gone. However, in some other nations, like the People's Republic of China, citizens do not enjoy the same levels of freedom of speech as Americans perceive as the norm, especially if that opinion is seen as unfavorable by the Communist Party, can be harmful to one's reputation, and in some cases, even their livelihood. One of those famous incidents surrounding freedom of expression occurred on June 4th, 1989. The Tiananmen Square massacre occurred while thousands of students around the nation gathered at the square to mourn the death of Hu Yaobang, who had overseen the education policies of China. Incidentally, while Hu was in his post of education, numerous student protests erupt around the country, and Hu was blamed for these disruptions and purged by the Communist Party. Once Hu had passed, students gathered at the square to protest both Hu's reputation as well as for more political freedom. However, the Communist Party and its armed forces began a crackdown on the protests. While there is no concrete number of protesters killed, some documents have been leaked saying that the number was at least 10,000. The generally accepted number is much more conservative, yet it still sits at a staggering 2,000 to 3,000 lives lost. As one of the most important and tragic events in Chinese history, students on the mainland do not have access to any information about the tragedy that occurred at Tiananmen Square on June 4th, 1989. Across the ocean, on the other side of the globe, freedom of expression in the United States is also being affected by the Communist Party. The Houston Rockets and the NBA's connection with the Communist Party led fans to being unable to bring signs into the arenas that express sentiments of support towards the Uyghurs or any pro-democratic movements in Hong Kong, as John Cena also received major heat from WWE and its Chinese partners that led to his eventual backtracking on a statement where he called Taiwan an independent nation. These events showed that even when the Western world is thousands of miles away, speech and other rights can still be affected and even stifled by a foreign entity. Beyond sports, Hollywood and film productions in the United States are also influenced by the Communist Party. Sentiments that may put the Communist Party in a negative light will not be approved for use in movies. Some examples include Red Dawn, Doctor Strange, and even Top Gun Maverick. These influences may seem like a surprise to some, but this occurs throughout many productions around the world. On the same topic of freedom of expression, any sort of platform that may promote free speech has seen restrictions by the Communist Party. For example, the game Animal Crossing was banned after protests in Hong Kong were organized on the platform. Beyond these influences in the entertainment sector, Chinese propaganda is also spread through the seemingly unharmful Confucius Institutes around the world. The magnitude of influence that these Confucius Institutes have in the world is reflected by the number of students it teaches. Approximately 9 million students across 146 different countries and regions at 525 different institutes. Many of these institutes are stationed at universities, where the institutes are capable of monitoring their students overseas and even promoting espionage. Hence the nickname China's Trojan Horse. In the U.S., like many Confucius Institutes have been closed due to concerns of penetration into American higher education by the Chinese Communist Party. Beyond international concerns, the Institute's faculty and teachers are hired directly by the Communist Party, and they are not allowed to speak about sensitive topics such as the three T's: Taiwan, Tibet, and Tiananmen Square, which, as mentioned by the Heritage Foundation, are considered the most unfavorable to be discussed by the Communist Party and its affiliates around the world. There are also a couple of lists full of topics that aren't allowed to be discussed, such as the 7 Speak-Nots, which include the topics of universal values, freedom of speech, civil society, civil rights, the historical errors of the Communist Party, the official bourgeoisie, and judicial independence. All of these topics are discussed openly by Americans every day without a second thought. But citizens of the People's Republic of China face serious repercussions when they speak on these topics. These are only a few examples of how freedom of speech is restricted in the mainland, and how the Communist Party goes to great lengths to spread its ideologies into other nations through subtle ways the naked eye cannot detect. Once again, I'm your host Drake, and if you want to learn more about free speech and the long history of controversies behind it in both the United States and China, be sure to tune into this show's podcast, where we provide longer and more in-depth dives into the topics discussed here. And as always, we encourage you to explore deeper into these subjects, to validate the content you consume from the mainstream media, and to make better and more informed decisions.